about all the things that we went through.
It's Mahir Zain on your radio. Naz, can you believe with around about 70%, give or take, one or two, right? Around about 70% of the world's surface, the Earth's surface, whether you believe it's flat, a square, or a globe, is covered with water.
I do. Unfortunately, it's true. It's what we're doing. Global warming.
Yeah. And then in the next 2 decades, the global demand for water is expected to surge dramatically, driven by a growing population, evolving lifestyles, ongoing development, agricultural needs. The estimation is that by 2050, water consumption could raise by 20 to 50%, with significant increases anticipated in industrial and domestic use. So, it's World Water Week, as we mentioned earlier, and today we talk about how public-private collaborations can unlock new opportunities. So joining us on the program this morning to discuss this further is the marketing director at Interwaste. Kate Stubbs is on video as well this morning, so you can view the video on Facebook and YouTube on the Al Ansar channels. Good morning, Kate Stubbs. Welcome to the Breakfast Rush.
Good morning. Great to be here and great. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure, and thank you for taking up the camera opportunity this morning. This year's World Water Week focuses on bridging borders. Water for a peaceful and sustainable future. How do you interpret this theme in the context of South Africa's current water challenges?
Yeah, I think the theme is really important because water is life. We cannot exist without water. So, and considering South Africa's current challenges, we are already seeing water shortages across the country. We are a water scarce nation, and you spoke about water demand increasing in the next 20, 30 years. In the next 5 years, we're going to have a water deficit of over 15% in terms of supply and demand. So we have critical water issues right now. We have issue water quality. So in terms of the theme of about bridging borders and water sustainability, we need to make sure that access to water for everyone. We need to our water resources. And bridging borders is to understand that our water systems are part of a larger ecosystem. So we need to work with our neighboring countries to ensure the sustainability of those systems and the health of those systems. So there's a lot of work to be done.
Mm-hmm. So how will South Africa's rising population and evolving urban lifestyles contribute to water scarcity?
Yeah, we are seeing more people sort of coming into urban areas. A lot of place on infrastructure. I mean, just rising population in general, obviously, people there are, the more demand on all resources. And I think from a waste management perspective, sometimes maybe we're not direct links between people, waste, and water. But the more people there are, the more they consume, the more waste there is. And waste that is not effectively managed can create contamination into our water systems, and we're seeing that, the amount of plastic in the oceans, the amount of contamination happening in our rivers. But from a waste perspective too, maybe we only think of it as our sort of physical general waste from our homes, but we have a lot of waste water. All industries use waste water, and what happens to that? It needs to be treated, it needs to be safely handled so that it doesn't contaminate our system. So the stress, we also seeing water needing to be distributed into certain areas and more intensity, but also the stress that we're putting in the systems we need to manage.
Indeed. If you've just tuned in now, we're speaking with the managing director at Interwaste, Kate Stubbs. Are there any emerging trends in waste management that could influence water sustainability?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a really exciting space. The waste industry is evolving all the time, which is important. We have new legislation. We also have, the global awareness and a local awareness of climate change and our environmental impact. So lots of corporates focusing on the space, being much more being held account, but being also much more conscious about their environmental impact. And lots of new technologies available to treat and process waste. I think the general shift is to move from our traditional business model of take, make, waste. Let's not care about it, to saying, how can we use these resources? How can we protect them? How can we reuse them? So this is this latest trend of the circular economy mindset, which designs waste out of the system. And it's not only physical waste, it's also designing, less power, less water usage. And where there is waste, how can we reuse that back into a system? So some of the technologies, especially in the wastewater space, can really repurpose that wastewater into potable standards. But we don't always need to have potable water. In South Africa, we wash our cars with clean, fresh municipal water. That's madness. We water our gardens with clean, fresh municipal water. We can treat water to a safe standard, a clean standard, that we can use for irrigation, industrial processes. So that's a shift that we're seeing, and it does provide a lot of exciting opportunities for us, both from the private and public sector, and as you mentioned up front, as well as for private-public sector collaboration.
Mm-hmm. What role can the private sector play in addressing South Africa's water challenges?
Yeah, I think we have a big, I'll talk from the private sector side. I think we do have an important role to play. A large portion of the private sector has, as I said, the industrial water usage. So we firstly, as businesses, need to ensure that we are reducing our consumption of water, that we are putting sustainable practices in place to manage our wastewater, repurposing that. And we are seeing that shift. I spoke earlier about the waste legislation in South Africa. Our waste management legislation is relatively new, so it's quite forward thinking, and it is evolving every year. And more different types of waste are banned from landfill disposal. So a good instance of that is in 2019, wastewater or liquid waste was banned from landfill disposal. So that's forced us, that drives innovation, it drives change, because you have to look for solutions. So from all those perspectives, we're seeing a lot of bigger corporates who are large water users installing effluent treatment plants on site to reuse their own water and repurpose their own water back into the system. And that's not only having a better impact environmentally, it's freeing up the clean water sources for other people, and for it's compliant, and it's just often, in the longer term, economically more viable. And then the other part where I think the private sector can play a role is having the funds with public sector and working together with government. There's a lot of skills and expertise needed for these new technologies, and we don't have a depth of skill and expertise in the space. And so I think we mustn't underestimate that. That's what we've also got to invest in, to have those type of skills and expertise, and look at data and AI and all sorts of things that are available to manage our water more effectively.
Indeed. I want to thank you for your time this morning, and your valuable information to our listeners, and wish you a wonderful day forward.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. If you've been watching, yes, that was Managing Director at InterWaste, Kate Stubbs. We're talking water, sustainability as well. It's World Water Week, and another video going to go live in right about 20 minutes or so from now. And that video is going to be Flip It. So if you want to flip it, then we can flip it together, you and I, a little bit later on. For this morning, that's it for this video. We'll come back a bit later. It is your breakfast rush as we get up to 7 a.m. We've got you